The wind howled mercilessly as Roma sought shelter from the punishing storm. His weathered hands, marked by 70 winters, pushed open the cabin door he believed abandoned. Inside, amber firelight revealed a woman with eyes that held no fear, only certainty. "I've waited for you," she whispered, her voice steady despite the thunder that shook the walls. He stood frozen, dripping rainwater onto rough-hewn floorboards. As she approached, this woman, a stranger with familiar eyes, reached for his face. "You're the one to give me a son." Her declaration hung in the air between them. Could fate have truly led this aging Apache warrior to this particular cabin on this particular night? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. Roma's hand moved instinctively to the knife at his belt, his weathered fingers tensing against the worn leather handle. "I don't know what game you're playing," he said finally, his voice low and steady despite the storm of confusion within. "But I'm leaving now." Leah remained unmoved, her eyes never leaving his face. "The storm won't let you, not tonight." As if answering her certainty, thunder cracked overhead, shaking the small cabin to its foundations. "Sit," she continued, gesturing to a rough-hewn chair by the fire. "We have much to discuss, and the night is long." Roma hesitated, caught between dignity and practicality. The howling wind outside made his decision for him. With reluctance, he lowered himself into the offered seat, keeping his back straight and his eyes alert. "I've seen you," Leah said simply, moving to pour a steaming liquid from the kettle that hung over the fire. "In my dreams. For 3 winters now. Many women dream," Roma replied dismissively, though he accepted the offered cup. The familiar scent of herbs his own people used for clarity of thought rose with the steam. His suspicion deepened. "Not like this." Leah settled across from him, her movements deliberate and calm. "I saw this cabin before I found it. I saw the storm that would bring you. I even saw the scar on your left forearm, the one shaped like the crescent moon." Roma's cup halted halfway to his lips. The scar in question remained hidden beneath his sleeve, a remnant from a battle decades past. No one outside his tribe had ever seen it. "You're afraid," she observed, without mockery. "That's good. So am I. What do you want from me?" Roma asked plainly. "Not what I once thought." Leah's gaze dropped to her hands, strong and capable but trembling slightly. "When the dreams began, I thought I was losing my mind. My husband had just died. I was alone in territory that forgives neither weakness nor solitude. Then my grandmother's sister found me. The medicine woman you mentioned," Leah nodded. "She helped me understand. The dreams weren't madness. They were a map, leading me here. Leading you here." Roma drank deeply, gathering his thoughts. "And this son you spoke of, my bloodline ends with me unless the prophecy is fulfilled," she said simply. "4 pregnancies, 4 losses. My husband's family blamed my mother's blood. The medicine woman said only a child born of 2 divided halves could survive. And you believe I am this other half?" Roma couldn't keep the skepticism from his voice. "Woman, I have 70 winters behind me. My time for fathering children has long passed." "Age means little to the spirits when they have decided," Leah replied. She rose suddenly, moving to a loose board near the hearth. From beneath it she withdrew something wrapped in faded red cloth. "Before you dismiss everything as the ravings of a lonely woman," she said, unwrapping the object carefully, "explain this." In her palm rested a small silver case. She opened it to reveal a daguerreotype, its surface cloudy with age. The image showed a couple, a proud Apache man standing beside a fair-skinned woman whose eyes carried the same determined expression as Leah's. "My grandmother and her husband," Leah explained. "Look at his shoulder." Roma leaned forward, squinting in the dim light. There, barely visible on the man's exposed shoulder, was a marking identical to one Roma carried, the sign of a specific Apache lineage, one believed lost decades ago. "Coincidence," he muttered, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "There's more." Leah said quietly, but the night is long, and you need rest. The storm won't break until morning. We have time. Roma studied her face in the firelight, searching for deceit and finding only a weary resolve that mirrored his own. Outside, the storm raged with renewed fury, sealing them together in this moment of impossible connection. We have time, he repeated, the words feeling strangely like surrender. Morning light filtered through cracks in the cabin walls, painting thin golden lines across the worn plank floor. Roma sat motionless on his bedroll, watching dust motes dance in the beams. He had slept little, his mind circling like a hawk around the woman and her impossible claims. Leah moved quietly around the small space, banking the fire and preparing a simple meal. Neither spoke until she placed a steaming bowl before him. "You should eat," she said. "The trails will be muddy from the storm." Roma nodded, accepting both the food and her assumption that he would leave. He studied her in the morning light, the strength in her movements, the solitary competence of someone long accustomed to handling life's burdens alone. "Your husband," Roma began carefully. "He's been gone how long?" "2 winters, Leah replied without looking up. "Fever took it. Nothing I tried could break it." Roma understood that particular weight. "My wife and son died under my hands as well," he said, the admission surprising him. "I was a healer among my people." The greatest irony. Something shifted in Leah's expression. "Is that why you wander? Punishment?" "Perhaps." Roma finished his meal in silence, before continuing. "I seek a place to complete my journey. The mountains call to old bones." "You mean to die?" Leah stated plainly. "I mean to finish what remains of my path with dignity," Roma corrected, though the distinction felt thin even to his own ears. Leah sat across from him, her hands wrapped around her own bowl. "Tell me of your people." Roma hesitated, then reached for his pack. From a hide pouch, he withdrew an object wrapped in softened deerskin. Unwrapping it revealed a wooden flute, its surface marked with notches and scars. One section darkened by fire. "I was born to the people of the mountain spirit," he began, his fingers tracing the flute's scars without bringing it to his lips. "My father was an elder of counsel, my mother a keeper of stories. I was chosen young for healing ways. My music could ease pain, my hands could find sickness and draw it out." "You don't play anymore," Leah observed, eyeing how he held the instrument like a memory, too painful to fully embrace. "Not since they died. My wife Nera and our..." Roma rewrapped the flute carefully. "I failed them. The sickness came too quickly. Nothing worked. After, the people looked at me differently. How could the great healer not save his own family?" "So you left," Leah finished for him. "I was asked to stay, but every face, every dwelling, all reminded me of what was lost." Roma's voice grew distant. "I've walked for many seasons, helped where I could, harmed no one, but never stayed. And now you seek your ending place." Roma nodded. "Until a storm and a strange woman's words interrupted my journey." Leah rose, moving to the small trunk at the foot of her bed. "My story is not so different," she said, rummaging inside. "My husband Daniel brought me here from Pennsylvania. We were to build a life, raise children." Her voice caught slightly. "4 times I carried. 4 times the earth reclaimed them before their first breath." She returned, with a small leather pouch. "After Daniel died, I nearly followed him. Then she came, my grandmother's sister, Eliza, half Apache though few knew it. She lives between worlds, honored by both for her healing ways." "The medicine woman you mentioned," Roma said. "Yes, she gave me this." Leah opened the pouch, revealing a mixture of dried herbs and roots. Roma recognized from his own traditions. "She taught me the old ways, my grandmother's ways," said the land remembered what people forgot. "And this prophecy about a child," Leah met his gaze steadily. "She said our bloodlines were once joined, generations ago. That the separation brought in balance. Only by reuniting could healing begin." Roma stood abruptly. "These are stories, woman. I cannot give you what you seek." "Perhaps," Leah acknowledged, "or perhaps you've been guided here for reasons beyond understanding." She gestured to his packed belongings. "The mountain will wait another day." The trails are still dangerous. Roma glanced toward the door, his path forward suddenly less clear than it had been for years. Outside, birds called in the clearing mist, and somewhere distant, water rushed over storm-swollen banks. One more day, he conceded, telling himself it was merely practical. Until the paths clear, Roma stepped outside the cabin, breathing deeply of the forest air. 3 days had passed since the storm, yet still he remained. The trails had cleared, but something else had clouded his resolve. He settled on a stump near the cabin's edge, withdrew his small knife, and began shaping a piece of pine he'd selected that morning. The familiar rhythm of carving settled his thoughts. Since boyhood, his hands had needed purpose. The cabin door creaked open. Leah emerged with a basket, nodding toward him before heading to her small garden patch. Roma watched her methodical movements as she harvested late summer herbs. There was something in her efficiency that spoke of both respect for the plants and knowledge of their purpose. "You grow medicine plants in the pattern of my people," Roma observed, breaking their comfortable morning silence. Leah straightened, wiping her brow with the back of her hand. "Eliza showed me, said it honors the plants to arrange them as they were taught." Roma nodded, continuing his carving. "The circular pattern, the sacred directions. Few outsiders know this." "Am I still an outsider after 3 days of sharing meals?" Lee asked, a hint of humor softening her usually guarded expression. "Perhaps less of one," Roma conceded, surprising himself with the admission. Lee approached, curious about his work. "What are you making?" "A spoon," he replied simply, turning the emerging utensil in his weathered hands. "Yours are wearing thin." Leah's expression registered surprise at this small kindness. She lowered herself to sit nearby, sorting through her gathered herbs. They worked in companionable silence until she spoke again. "Why did you really stay?" she asked, not looking up from her task. "The paths cleared yesterday." Roma's hands stilled momentarily. "I'm not certain," he admitted. "Perhaps an old man's curiosity. About the prophecy? About a woman who lives alone on the edge of 2 worlds and fears neither." The honesty in his words surprised them both. Leah met his gaze then, something unreadable crossing her features. "I fear plenty," she corrected softly, "just not strangers at my door." A sudden fit of coughing interrupted her words. Roma looked up sharply, noting the slight flush across her cheeks that hadn't come from the morning sun. She recovered quickly, dismissing his concern with a wave of her hand. "Dust from the herbs," she claimed, though Roma recognized the hollow quality in her breathing. "How long have you been ill?" he asked directly. "I'm not. Woman, I was healing before you were born." Roma interrupted. "Your body speaks what your words don't." Leah's shoulders sagged slightly. "Since last winter," she admitted. "It comes and goes. Nothing serious." Roma set aside his carving and rose, approaching her with the careful dignity that characterized his movements. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. Roma placed weathered palms against her temples, then gently pressed against the lymph nodes at her throat. His touch was clinical yet somehow intimate. Leah remained perfectly still under his examination. "Your lungs hold water," he pronounced finally. "The beginning stages. I've seen this before." His expression grew distant. "My wife had similar symptoms before." He didn't finish the sentence, but Leah understood. "Is that why you've stayed? You recognized the sickness?" Roma stepped back, returning to his carving stump. "No," he said after a long moment. "But perhaps it's why the spirits guided me here." "So now you believe in the spirits' guidance?" Leah asked with gentle skepticism. Roma's knife resumed its steady work against the wood. "I believe a man my age has seen enough to know there are patterns beyond understanding." He looked up at her. "And that medicine grows in your garden that could help your condition. You would treat me." The question contained layers of meaning beyond the simple word. Roma studied the emerging shape of the spoon in his hands, its handle unconsciously taking the form of intertwined serpents, a design his people used to represent healing. "Until you are well," he said finally, "then I will continue my journey." Leah nodded, accepting this new arrangement without pressing further. She returned to her herbs, but the air between them had shifted, filled now with unspoken possibility, neither was ready to name. The fire cast dancing shadows across the cabin walls as Roma crushed dried mullein leaves in the old clay bowl. Its surface was worn smooth from generations of use, the faded symbols around its rim barely visible in the flickering light. Roma's fingers traced them absently as he worked. "This bowl has seen many healings," he observed, adding water from the kettle. "The markings are old, older than either of our peoples in this territory." Leah watched from her bed, propped up against rolled blankets. A week of treatment had improved her breathing, but the fatigue lingered. "It belonged to my grandmother," she said. "I never understood the markings. They tell a story of balance," Roma explained, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a storyteller. "Sun and moon, earth and sky, sickness and health, all part of the great circle." His weathered finger outlined a particular symbol. "This one represents transformation, the moment between states. Like now," Leah said quietly, "neither fully sick nor fully well." Roma nodded, appreciating her understanding. Like many things in life, the dawn is neither night nor day. A child is neither seed nor adult. He paused, adding a pinch of another herb to the mixture. "A man can be neither fully lost nor fully found." Their eyes met briefly before Roma returned his attention to the medicine. "Tell me of your wife," Leah said, the intimacy of the moment making the request seem natural. Roma's hands continued their work, but his eyes grew distant. "Nara was born during a meteor shower. The elders said stars fell to earth the night she arrived, and I believed it. Her spirit burned bright." A rare smile touched his lips. She had calmed a frightened horse with just her presence. Yet she took no softness from any man who questioned her worth. "She sounds formidable." She was. Roma stirred the mixture with steady precision. "Our son had her same fire, just 7 summers, when the sickness came." The smile faded. 2 days. That was all it took. My medicines, my prayers. Nothing slowed it. Leah reached out, her fingers lightly touching his arm. "No healer can stop death when it comes with such purpose." Roma looked at her hand on his skin. This simple human contact he'd denied himself for so long. The mind knows this. The heart remembers differently. He rose, bringing the finished medicine to her bedside. "Drink slowly," he instructed, helping her sit more upright. Lee took the bowl, her hands warming against the ancient clay. The bitter liquid made her wince, but she drank without complaint. "You're a good patient," Roma observed, "and you're a good healer," she countered. "Despite what you believe." Roma took the empty bowl, his fingertips brushing hers in the exchange. Something electric passed between them, causing both to pause. "Roma," Leah said after a moment, her voice uncertain, "why did you never remarry after Nara?" The question hung in the firelit air. Roma returned to his place by the hearth before answering. "Among my people, some bonds continue beyond death," he said finally. "I felt her presence for many years after. It would have been disrespectful. And now?" Leah's question was barely audible. Roma stared into the flames. "Now I feel only my own solitude. Nara's spirit has moved beyond." "As it should." He looked up at Leah. "Until recently." "What changed?" "Perhaps nothing," Roma said carefully. "Perhaps everything." An old man finds himself in a stranger's cabin, making medicines he swore never to prepare again, feeling purpose he thought long dead. Leah's eyes shone in the firelight. "Is it so terrible to feel purpose again?" "Not terrible," Roma admitted. "Frightening, like waking from a long sleep to find the world changed." "Or unchanged," Leah suggested. "Just waiting." Roma nodded slowly, understanding her meaning. He glanced toward the window where the first snowflakes of the season spiraled down from the darkened sky. "The first snow comes early this year," he noted. "The winter will be long." "Will you stay?" Leah asked, the question containing layers beyond the simple words. Roma watched the snow falling more heavily now, trails disappearing beneath the white blanket. Until the spring thaw, he said, making a decision that felt both momentous and inevitable. A proper healing takes time. What remained unspoken between them, that perhaps it wasn't only Leah who needed healing, filled the small cabin with a warmth that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. Winter had settled fully upon the mountain. 6 weeks of snow and ice had transformed the forest around the cabin into a crystalline world of white and shadow. Inside, life had found its rhythm. Roma stoked the morning fire, his movements practiced and efficient. He glanced toward Leah, who sat by the window, morning light illuminating her work as she repaired a torn shirt. Her breathing came easier now, the treatments working as he'd hoped. The hollows beneath her cheekbones had filled, color returning to her once pale features. The last of the juniper bark is gone, Roma said, interrupting the comfortable silence. I'll need to collect more. Leah looked up from her mending. The nearest stands are a half-day's journey, and the snow is deep. Wait until tomorrow. We'll go together. Roma nodded, accepting her wisdom without the resistance that would have come naturally months ago. Together, then, they shared a simple breakfast of cornmeal porridge, sweetened with the last of summer's berries. As they ate, Leah studied Roma's profile. The strong lines of his face softened in the golden morning light. You're staring, he noted without looking up. I'm wondering, she corrected. About what? About whether you ever intended to reach the mountains, or if you were always meant to stop here. Leah set her empty bowl aside. About whether you still plan to leave when spring comes. Roma considered her words carefully. A man my age doesn't question the path that brings him shelter in winter, he said finally. As for spring, his voice trailed off, unwilling to make promises the future might not honor. Leah rose, moving to the small chest at the foot of her bed. There's something I need to show you, she said. Something I should have shared earlier. She returned with a small object wrapped in faded calico. Unwrapping it revealed a deerskin pouch, worn soft with age and handling, decorated with faded beadwork in patterns. Roma recognized immediately. This belonged to my grandmother, Leah said, holding it reverently. She kept it hidden her entire life, even from her husband. On her deathbed, she gave it to my mother, who passed it to me. Roma's eyes never left the pouch. This is a spirit carrier of my people, he said quietly, given only to those of sacred lineage. Yes, Leah placed it in his hands. Open it. Roma untied the leather thongs with careful fingers. Inside was a small amount of earth, dark and rich, mixed with what appeared to be fragments of bone and shell. My grandmother told my mother this contained soil from 2 sacred grounds, Leah explained. One from her mother's people, your people, and one from her father's burial place, together in one pouch as she carried both bloodlines in one body. Roma looked up sharply. Your grandmother was Apache, half, Leah confirmed. Her mother was taken in a raid as a child, raised by a childless settler couple. When she was grown, she married a white trader who protected her secret. Their daughter, my grandmother, married into settler society, burying her heritage deeper with each generation. Roma's fingers traced the beadwork, recognizing symbols specific to his own clan. These markings, he said slowly, they belong to the mountain spirit people. My people. Yes, Leah said simply. Eliza, the medicine woman, is my grandmother's half-sister. When she found me after Daniel died, she said the old prophecy was coming full circle, that what was separated would be rejoined. Roma stared at the pouch in his hands, feeling the weight of its significance. And you believe I am part of this prophecy, that 2 broken bloodlines might heal through us? I didn't, Leah admitted. Not at first. The dreams seemed like grief's madness. Eliza's words like an old woman's superstition. She reached across, her fingers brushing his. But then you came, exactly as I'd dreamed, and I began to wonder. Roma carefully retied the pouch. Dreams and coincidences make thin shelter against life's storms, Leah. Is that what we are? Coincidence? There was no challenge in her tone, only genuine question. Roma returned the pouch to her hands, his calloused fingers lingering against her skin. I don't know what we are, he said honestly. Only that I have found more peace in this cabin than in 20 years of wandering. Outside, snow began falling again, thick flakes swirling in the morning light. They watched together as the world disappeared behind the white veil. Perhaps that's enough, Leah said softly. For now. Roma nodded, a half-smile warming his normally stoic features. Perhaps it is. That evening, as firelight painted the cabin in amber hues, Roma found himself humming an old melody, something he hadn't done since Nara's death. The sound surprised him, yet felt right in this place, with this woman whose existence had somehow rekindled what he thought long extinguished. Whatever prophecy or coincidence had brought them together, he was, for the first time in decades, not eager to leave it behind. We need supplies, Leah announced, studying their dwindling stores with a practiced eye. 2 months of winter had depleted their reserves faster than anticipated. The trading post at Cooper's Creek should be open, despite the snow. Roma looked up from the moccasin he was repairing. 3 hours each way if the trails are passable. They will be. Traders came through the South Pass 3 days ago. I saw their tracks while gathering pine needles. Leah was already gathering her heaviest clothing. We should leave at first light tomorrow. Roma nodded, though concern shadowed his features. They had existed in the protected world of the cabin for so long that the prospect of encountering others, particularly settlers, stirred his caution. Your hesitation is loud, Leah observed, pausing her preparations. These mountains have changed since my youth, Roma said. The people and the settlers exist in uneasy balance. A lone Apache and a white woman traveling together will draw attention. Leah approached him, her expression resolute. Look at me, Roma. He raised his eyes to hers, finding the quiet strength that had first impressed him. I have lived among these settlers for years, she said. They know me as Daniel's widow, strange perhaps, but respected for my independence. As for you, she reached for something on her shelf, returning with a small silver-framed mirror. Look closely. Roma reluctantly took the mirror, uncomfortable with his own reflection. His people believed too much self-gazing thinned the spirit. Not at yourself, Leah instructed. At me, my eyes in the sunlight. She positioned herself by the window where winter sun streamed in, illuminating her face. Roma looked as directed, then drew in a sharp breath. There, unmistakable in her hazel eyes, were golden flecks arranged in a pattern he had seen all his life among his people, a trait so specific to his clan that their name in the old language translated to star-eyed ones. My mother had these, Leah said softly, as did my grandmother. The traders will see what they expect to see, a half-breed woman and her aging Indian helper perhaps. Nothing remarkable. Roma set the mirror down carefully. You've hidden in plain sight all your life, as did my mother, as did hers. Leah resumed her preparations. We leave at dawn. The journey to Cooper's Creek passed in companionable silence, broken only by Roma's occasional comments about the landscape or wildlife tracks they encountered. The trading post appeared through the trees by midday, a sturdy log structure with smoke curling from its chimney, surrounded by smaller outbuildings. Let me speak first, Leah murmured, as they approached. Roma nodded, pulling his worn hat lower. The warmth inside the trading post was welcome after the cold journey. 3 men stood near the pot-bellied stove, their conversation halting as Leah and Roma entered. Behind the counter, a heavy-set man with a graying beard brightened at the sight of Leah. Mrs. Harper, didn't expect to see anyone from up your way until the thaw. His curious gaze shifted to Roma, but quickly returned to Leah. Winter's been kind enough to let us through, Mr. Cooper, Leah replied easily. We need supplies, flour, coffee, salt if you have it. Got a fresh shipment last week, Cooper confirmed, already gathering items. Who's your companion? This is Roma, Leah said simply. He's been helping with repairs since the autumn storms. Roma nodded respectfully but remained silent, aware of the other men's scrutiny. Apache, ain't he? One of the men by the stove asked, his tone carrying an edge. Roma recognized all too well. He is, Leah confirmed. Without elaboration, her attention on the supplies Cooper was assembling. Bit unusual, ain't it? Having his kind around your place. The same man pressed, stepping closer. "No more unusual than living alone in these mountains, Mr. Tanner," Leah replied coolly, "which I've done successfully for years." Cooper, sensing tension, intervened. "Got some news might interest you, Mrs. Harper. Army's establishing a new fort 20 miles east, saying it'll help with the Indian problem." Roma remained impassive, though his shoulders tensed slightly. "I wasn't aware we had an Indian problem, Mr. Cooper," Leah said, counting out coins for their purchases. "The treaties have held for years." "Treaties," spat Tanner, "worth less than the paper they're written on. Some say your Apache friends' people been raiding settlements south of here." Roma's eyes met Leah's briefly, a silent communication born of months together. "My people have honored the mountain boundaries," Roma said, his dignified voice surprising the men. "If there are raids, look elsewhere for their source." A heavy silence followed, broken by Cooper clearing his throat. "Your supplies are ready, Mrs. Harper." Outside, snowflakes had begun falling again, a gentle curtain drawing closed around them as they loaded their purchases onto Leah's small sledge. "That went better than expected," Leah said quietly, as they departed. Roma nodded, his gaze on the distant mountains. "But it will not be the last of such encounters. Change comes to these hills, Leah, like the snow softly at first, then burying everything beneath." They traveled homeward in thoughtful silence, each contemplating how their private world had briefly collided with the larger one beyond, and how that larger world might eventually find its way to their door. The blizzard descended without warning, transforming the afternoon into swirling white chaos. Roma secured the last of the livestock in the small barn, while Leah battened down the cabin against the storm's fury. By nightfall, snow had buried the world outside, and winds howled like hungry spirits around their shelter. 3 days, perhaps 4, Roma predicted, hanging his snow-crusted coat by the fire. "This storm has the feel of those that linger." Leah nodded, stirring a pot of stew that filled the cabin with savory aromas. "We're well provisioned since the trading post journey, though I admit I find myself grateful for the excuse to stay close to home." The word home hung between them, weighted with meaning neither had fully acknowledged. 3 months had passed since Roma first stumbled through her door. What began as reluctant shelter had transformed into something neither had anticipated. "The visit to Cooper's Creek troubles you still," Roma observed, accepting the bowl she offered. Leah settled across from him at the small table, their knees nearly touching in the confined space. "Not the visit itself, what it revealed." She looked up at him. "The world beyond these walls is changing, Roma. Tanner's words about your people, the new fort being built. I fear what's coming." "Fear serves little purpose against the inevitable," Roma replied, though his expression softened. "But preparedness does." They ate in comfortable silence, the storm's raging counterpoint to the warmth within. After their meal, Roma reached into his pocket, hesitating briefly, before withdrawing something wrapped in a scrap of soft leather. "I've been working on this," he said, uncharacteristic uncertainty in his voice. During the quiet afternoons, Leah accepted the small package, her fingers brushing his in the exchange, a contact that no longer seemed accidental. She unwrapped it carefully to reveal an exquisitely carved hairpin, fashioned from deer antler, polished to a soft glow. Intricate designs spiraled along its length, Apache symbols intertwined with patterns she recognized from her grandmother's few precious possessions. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tracing the carvings with her fingertip. "Among my people, such gifts carry meaning," Roma said, his eyes steady on hers. "A recognition of connection." Leah held his gaze, understanding the significance of what remained unspoken. "Will you?" she asked, offering the pin back to him. Roma took it, his weathered hands surprisingly gentle as he gathered her hair, twisting it into a simple knot before sliding the pin into place. His fingers lingered against her neck, a touch that sent warmth cascading through her despite the storm's cold breath seeping through the cabin walls. "There was a time I believed my heart died with Nara," Roma said quietly, his hand still resting lightly against her shoulder. "I was wrong." Lee reached up, covering his hand with hers, "and I believed I would always be alone." The fire cracked suddenly, sending sparks dancing up the chimney. Outside, the wind's howl intensified, but within their small circle of light, something fragile and precious was taking form. What happens when spring comes? Leah asked, voicing the question that had haunted her through the winter months. Once I sought the mountains to find an ending, Roma replied. His free hand rose to touch the hairpin he'd placed. Now, I find myself considering other paths. Leah stood slowly, bringing them face to face. And if I asked you to stay beyond the thaw, then I would consider that the spirits who guided me to your door that night had a purpose greater than shelter from a storm. Roma's voice deepened. But Leah, I am still what I am, an aging Apache in a world growing hostile to my kind. To bind your fate to mine brings complications. My fate was bound to yours the moment you crossed my threshold, Leah replied with quiet certainty. The only question is whether we acknowledge what already exists between us. Roma's hand moved to cup her cheek, the gesture conveying tenderness that belied his warrior's strength. Then I acknowledge it, he said simply. The storm raged through the night, but they remained by the fire, talking softly of memories long buried, of hopes cautiously examined, of futures neither had dared imagine. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they slept side by side on blankets before the hearth, his arm protectively around her waist, her head nestled against his shoulder. Outside, snow continued to fall, isolating their cabin from the world. But within those walls, isolation had transformed into sanctuary, and two souls long accustomed to solitude discovered the unexpected warmth of belonging. Roma rose before dawn, his senses alert to a change he couldn't immediately identify. Something had disturbed his sleep, not the usual sounds of the forest awakening, but an absence where familiar noises should have been. No birds called, no small creatures rustled in the underbrush. Careful not to wake La, he dressed silently and stepped outside. February's chill bit through his clothing as he surveyed their small clearing. The snow revealed nothing unusual until his gaze fell upon the path leading to the creek. There, arranged in a formation no random occurrence could explain, lay 3 river stones painted with faded red ochre symbols. Roma knelt, examining them without touching. The message was clear to any who knew the old ways. Watched, danger, decision. The stones were positioned to indicate the direction north, toward the high ridges where his people traditionally camped during winter hunts. What is it? Leah's voice came from behind him, her breath forming small clouds in the morning air. Roma stood slowly. We have visitors, he said, gesturing toward the stones. My people have been watching. This is their way of making their presence known. Leah studied the arrangement. Is it a threat? A warning, Roma corrected, and an invitation. He pointed to the 3rd stone. This symbol means a choice must be made. What choice? That remains unclear. Roma scanned the tree line, knowing watchful eyes likely observed them still. But they wished to speak. Leah followed his gaze, seeing nothing but silent forest. How long have they been watching us? Since before our journey to Cooper's Creek, I suspect. Roma gathered the stones carefully, perhaps since I first arrived. They returned to the cabin, both newly alert to the forest's secrets. As Roma built up the morning fire, Leah prepared a simple breakfast, her movements betraying her unease. You believe they mean us harm? She asked finally. Roma shook his head. If harm was their intent, we would not have received warning. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. But my presence here with you raises questions among my people. Because I'm white, Leah stated plainly. Because boundaries between our worlds grow more defined with each passing season, Roma corrected. And because my status among the people carries obligations I have long ignored. Leah sat across from him, her eyes seeking his. What obligations? Roma's weathered hands wrapped around the mug of hot coffee she'd provided. I was more than just a healer, Leah. My father was chief of our band. After his death, leadership should have passed to me. He sighed deeply. Instead, I chose exile. My grief for Nara and our son became an excuse to abandon my responsibilities. Understanding dawned in Leah's expression. And now they've found you. They never lost me, Roma said with a hint of pride. The people always know where their own walk, but they have respected my solitude. Until now. What's changed? Roma met her gaze steadily. Everything. The new fort being built. Increased tensions with settlers. And, he hesitated. My decision to remain here with you, rather than continuing my solitary journey. Leah reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. What will you tell them? The truth, Roma replied simply. That fate or the spirits guided me here. That our bloodlines share ancient connections. That I have found reasons to live rather than merely existing. Leah's fingers tightened around his. Will they accept that? Some will, others may not. Roma's expression grew somber. But there is more at stake than our happiness. Leah, the warning stones suggest trouble approaches, not just for us, but for all who live in these mountains. A knock at the door startled them both. Roma rose, motioning for Leah to remain seated. He opened the door to find a young Apache warrior standing proudly in the clearing, his face painted with the markings of a messenger. Grandfather, the young man addressed Roma in the Apache tongue, using the respectful title for an elder rather than any family connection. The council fire burns, they await the one who was lost. Roma replied in the same language, his voice carrying an authority Leah had never heard before. The exchange was brief but intense. When the messenger departed, Roma closed the door slowly, his expression troubled. They request my presence at council, he explained. Riders from the fort have been seen in tribal hunting grounds. Treaties are being questioned. When must you go? Leah asked, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. Tomorrow at dawn. Roma returned to her side. But I must go alone. Leah nodded, understanding the unspoken complexities. And you will return. Roma took her face between his palms, a gesture of tenderness that still felt new between them. Nothing could prevent it, he promised. What we have built here is worth fighting to preserve. That night, as they lay together in the darkness, unspoken fears filled the silence between them. Fears not of each other, but of the world that seemed determined to intrude upon the sanctuary they had created. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold as Roma prepared for his journey. Leah stood in the doorway, her face composed despite the worry evident in her eyes. They had spoken little since the messenger's departure, each lost in private thoughts about what his return to the tribal council might mean for their future. The journey is half a day, Roma said, checking his supplies one final time. I should return by tomorrow night. Leah nodded, handing him a small package of food she'd prepared. Be careful, she said simply, the words carrying the weight of deeper emotion. Roma took her hand, pressing something into her palm. Keep this close until I return. Leah opened her fingers to find a small carved stone bear, Roma's personal medicine token, that he'd carried for decades. The gesture's significance wasn't lost on her. Among his people, sharing one's medicine object meant sharing protection, a bond not casually offered. I'll guard it well, she promised. Their farewell was brief, a lingering touch, a shared glance that conveyed what words could not. Then Roma was gone, disappearing into the forest with the silent efficiency of a man returning to ways long practiced, but never forgotten. The tribal encampment lay hidden in a sheltered valley, invisible until Roma crested the final ridge. Below, 24 lodges stood in the traditional circular pattern, smoke from cooking fires rising in thin columns against the winter sky. Children played among the dwellings while women worked at daily tasks. Warriors stood guard at strategic points, their posture alert but not alarmed at his approach. A young scout spotted him first, raising a hand in greeting rather than warning. Word of his arrival spread quickly through the camp. By the time Roma reached the outer circle, a small gathering had formed to meet him. At their center stood Takoda, now a man in his prime, though Roma remembered him as a boy. The bear claw necklace and eagle feathers in his hair marked him as the band's current leader. The wanderer returns, Takoda said in Apache, his voice carrying to the assembled tribe. Our fires welcome you, elder. Roma inclined his head respectfully. I come when called, as is proper. The formalities observed, Takoda led him toward the central council lodge, where the elders waited. Inside, the familiar scents of sage and cedar brought memories flooding back. memories of his father's leadership councils, of decisions that shaped the tribe's future. 7 elders sat in a semicircle, faces weathered by age and experience. Among them Roma recognized White Hawk, his father's closest advisor, and now the oldest living member of their band. The ancient man's eyes brightened with recognition. The son of Black Bear has walked a long road, White Hawk observed. Now the circle begins to close. Roma settled into the place indicated for him, accepting the ceremonial cup of spring water offered. Only after these traditional courtesies did Takoda address the reason for the summon. The Bluecoats build a new fort 3 days' ride from our winter grounds, he explained, using the tribe's term for soldiers. Their leader, a man called Major Greeley, speaks with 2 tongues. To our faces he offers peace. Behind our backs, he tells the settlers we raid their livestock and threaten their families. An elder named Running Fox added, 3 of our young men were killed last moon while hunting deer. The soldiers claim they were attacking a settler's homestead. The tensions grow like storm clouds, White Hawk said gravely. We remember the old treaties, but the white man's memory seems shorter with each passing season. Roma listened carefully, recognizing the dangerous patterns forming. And what do you seek from me? I have been absent from council fires for many winters. Takoda exchanged glances with White Hawk before responding. We need one who understands both worlds, one who can speak to the blue coats in ways they comprehend, yet holds the people's interests in his heart. You know where I have been, Roma said carefully, with whom I have shared my days. White Hawk lifted a hand, silencing murmurs from younger council members. We know you dwell with a woman of mixed blood, whose grandmother's mother came from our people. The ancient prophecy speaks of scattered seeds, returning to strengthen the whole. From beside him the old man withdrew a ceremonial pipe, its stone bowl darkened from generations of use. Roma recognized it immediately, his father's pipe, used only when the tribe faced its greatest challenges. We do not ask you to abandon your chosen path, White Hawk continued, offering the pipe. We ask that you help us protect ours. Roma accepted the sacred object, feeling its familiar weight. In this simple exchange, the council acknowledged both his past position and his current circumstances. I will meet with this Major Greeley, Roma agreed, and judge his true intentions toward the people. But understand, my home now stands between 2 worlds, as I do. White Hawk nodded slowly. Perhaps that is precisely why the spirits guided you there, son of Black Bear. The strongest bridge spans both banks of the river, without favoring either shore. As the council continued into the night, discussing strategies and sharing information, Roma felt the weight of responsibility settling once again upon his shoulders, a burden he had fled for years now. Voluntarily resumed, yet his thoughts repeatedly returned to the cabin miles away, where Leah waited, holding his medicine stone and carrying, though she did not yet know it, his heart. Leah stood at the cabin window, watching the forest edge for the 3rd consecutive evening. Roma should have returned by now. Each passing hour stretched her composure thinner, worry gnawing at her certainty that he would return as promised. Outside, February's early dusk cast long shadows across the snow-covered clearing. She touched the carved stone bear Roma had entrusted to her, its surface warm from being carried against her skin. The weight of his absence felt heavier than she had anticipated. This small cabin suddenly too quiet, too empty without his steady presence. A sharp knock at the door startled her from her vigil. Heart racing, she reached for Daniel's old rifle before approaching the entrance. "Who's there?" she called, voice steady despite her apprehension. "Mrs. Harper?" "It's Michael Cooper from the trading post." Relieved but cautious, Leah opened the door to find the trader's son standing on her porch, his horse tethered nearby. "Michael, this is unexpected." She stepped back, allowing him entry from the cold. The young man removed his hat, nervousness evident in his movements. "Pa sent me to warn you, there's trouble brewing. The new fort commander's been asking questions about folks living in these parts, particularly those with Indian connections." Leah's expression remained neutral. "I see, and your father thought to warn me specifically." Michael shifted uncomfortably. After your visit with the Apache, well, Pa figured you should know. Major Greeley's ordered a census of all settlers and their associations. He hesitated before adding, some of Tanner's men have been deputized. They're checking homesteads, supposedly looking for stolen livestock. I appreciate the warning, Leah said, offering him coffee which he declined with a glance at the darkening sky. There's more, Michael continued. Word is the Major met with the Apache Council yesterday. No one knows what was discussed, but soldiers were seen escorting an older Indian back toward the fort afterward. Leah's hand tightened on the doorframe. This Indian, did you hear any description? Just that he seemed important to them. Dressed in traditional ways but spoke English clear as any white man. Michael donned his hat. I should get back before full dark. Pal said to tell you if you need anything, send word. After Michael's departure, Leah secured the door and leaned against it, mind racing. Roma. Escorted by soldiers, the scenario played out in her imagination, each possibility more concerning than the last. Unable to remain still, she stoked the fire and moved to Roma's few possessions in the corner of the cabin. Among them sat a small deer-hide bag she had never seen him open, his medicine bundle, the most personal and sacred of a warrior's possessions. Ordinarily, she would never consider examining it, but fear for his safety overrode convention. If he had been detained, perhaps something inside might offer guidance. The bundle opened to reveal carefully wrapped contents: a hawk feather, a small piece of turquoise, a medicine matchstick similar to her grandmother's, but smaller, and something wrapped in faded red cloth that felt soft to her touch. Unwrapping it carefully, Lee found a lock of black hair tied with sinew and a tiny, exquisitely crafted moccasin, sized for an infant's foot. Her breath caught in her throat. Niera's hair, their son's moccasin. Roma's most precious memories, carried close through decades of solitary wandering, that he had left these with her, spoke volumes about his trust and his intentions to return. Carefully rewrapping everything, Lee returned the bundle to its place. As she did, her fingers brushed something solid hidden beneath Roma's spare shirt. Drawing it out, she discovered a small leather-bound journal, its pages filled with careful drawings and writing in both English and Apache. The most recent entry, dated the morning of his departure, contained a detailed map of the region, with markings indicating the tribal encampment, their cabin, the new fort's location, and several other symbols she couldn't decipher. Below it, written in Roma's precise hand, "If I do not return, seek White Hawk at the place marked with the crossed arrows. Tell him the son of Black Bear keeps his final promise. He will ensure your safety." Leah traced the words with trembling fingers. Roma had anticipated potential danger, prepared for it even while assuring her of his return. The realization both frightened and strengthened her. Outside, snow began falling again, thick flakes swirling in the gathering darkness. Leah added wood to the fire, settled in her chair, and laid Daniel's rifle across her lap. Whatever came with the dawn, she would face it with the same quiet resolve that had sustained her through all the hardships of her frontier life. But now, for the first time in years, she found herself praying not with the formal words of her childhood faith, but with the simple, urgent plea of a heart that had unexpectedly found something precious it could not bear to lose. "Return to me," she whispered into the quiet cabin. "Whatever stands between us, find your way back." The fort's commandant's office smelled of leather, pipe tobacco and ambition. Major Greeley, a man whose immaculate uniform and rigid posture spoke of West Point training rather than frontier experience, studied Roma from behind a massive oak desk. "You understand why I've requested your presence, Mr." The major deliberately left the question hanging. "Roma will suffice," he replied evenly. "And no, I do not understand being escorted here by armed guards after agreeing to serve as translator between your command and my people." Major Greeley's thin lips curved into what might charitably be called a smile. "A precaution merely. These are complicated times." He opened a drawer, withdrawing a folded document bearing official seals. "I'm told you once held a position of importance among the Apache, that your father was a chief." Roma remained silent, his face betraying nothing. "I'll be direct," Greeley continued, sliding the document across the desk. "New orders from the Department of War. All Apache bands in this territory are to be relocated to the reservation established near Fort Sill. Those who comply will receive government protection and provision. Those who resist," he left the consequence unspoken. Roma didn't touch the document. The treaties signed 3 winters past guaranteed hunting rights in these mountains for 20 years. Circumstances change. There have been incidents, fabricated ones, Roma countered. "My people have maintained peace." Greeley's expression hardened. "Your people? Interesting. I'm told you've been living with a white woman, Mrs. Harper, I believe, for some months now. One might question where your true loyalties lie." Roma's eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication of his concern at hearing Leah's name. "My loyalties are to justice and to truth, Major. The people have honored their commitments. It is the army that now breaks its word." Philosophical debates aside, Greeley said dismissively, "You have influence. Use it wisely. Convince your tribe to relocate peacefully, and both they and Mrs. Harper will face no difficulties." The implicit threat hung in the air between them. Roma studied the major carefully, reading the man's character in the cold calculation behind his eyes. "When do you require an answer?" Roma asked, his tone neutral despite the anger coursing through him. "You have 3 days to consult with your tribal council," Greeley replied. "I've arranged quarters for you here at the fort during that time." "You mean I am to be detained? Consider yourself an honored guest, crucial to a peaceful resolution." Greeley stood, signaling the end of their discussion. "Lieutenant Davis will show you to your accommodations." The accommodations proved to be a small room in the officers' quarters, comfortable enough, but with a guard posted outside. Roma sat on the narrow bed, contemplating the layers of deceit in Greeley's words. This was no negotiation but an ultimatum, with both his tribe and Leah being used as leverage. Hours later, a knock preceded the entrance of a young lieutenant carrying a tray of food. "Sir," the officer said with unexpected respect. "I've brought your evening meal." Roma nodded acknowledgement. "Lieutenant Davis, I presume?" "Yes, sir." The young man hesitated. "I wanted to say, my father served with the 7th Cavalry. He always spoke highly of the Apache scouts who guided them, said they were men of honor." Roma studied him, sensing an ally where he least expected one. "Your father saw clearly then." Davis glanced toward the door, lowering his voice. "The Major's reports about Apache raids, some of us have doubts. Tanner and his men bring in livestock they claim was stolen. But the brands look fresh." "You take a risk telling me this," Roma observed. "Perhaps." Davis straightened. "There's a supply wagon leaving for Cooper's Creek at dawn. The driver owes me a favor." Their eyes met in silent understanding before Davis departed, closing the door firmly behind him. Roma ate little, his mind working through possibilities. The window in his room was small but not impassable for a man of his experience. The fort's western wall backed against the forest. If Davis's implied offer was genuine, escape was possible but not without cost. Once gone, he would be labeled hostile, a threat to be eliminated. More concerning was the realization that Greeley knew about Leah. How long before soldiers, or worse, Tanner's deputized men, appeared at her cabin with questions? The warning stones had proven prophetic. Danger approached from all directions. As night fell, Roma made his decision. Removing his moccasins, he tore a strip from the leather sole, and using a splinter of wood from the bed frame, began scratching a message in Apache symbols on the underside. If he could get this to Whitehawk, the tribe would have warning to prepare, not for surrender, but for protection of their most vulnerable members. His thoughts turned to Leah, alone in their cabin. Whatever happened in the coming days, he had to return to her first. The path ahead was treacherous, but one certainty remained. The life they had begun building together was worth every risk he now faced. When Lieutenant Davis returned near midnight, he found Roma sitting calmly beside the window, gazing at the stars. Their exchange was brief, the understanding complete. By dawn, the Apache elder would be gone, setting in motion events neither could fully predict. Leah woke to the sound of horses approaching. Dawn had barely broken, thin grey light filtering through the cabin windows as she reached for Daniel's rifle. 4 days had passed since Michael Cooper's warning, with no word from Roma. Peering cautiously through the curtains, she saw 3 riders entering the clearing. Tanner and 2 men she recognized from the trading post. Their manner suggested official business rather than a social call. Quickly she smoothed her hair and straightened her clothing, placing the rifle within reach, but out of immediate sight. When the knock came, she opened the door with deliberate calm. "Mr. Tanner," she greeted him coolly. "What brings you here so early?" Tanner removed his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Mrs. Harper, we're conducting a survey of outlying properties. May we come in?" "I prefer we speak here," Leah replied, not moving from the doorway. "The cabin's in some disarray." Tanner's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just a few questions then. We understand you've been harboring an Apache on your property, the Indian who accompanied you to Cooper's Creek." "Roma has been helping with repairs and hunting," Leah said evenly. "Hardly harboring Mr. Tanner, and his current whereabouts. He's away on personal business." One of Tanner's companions snorted. "Told you, Jeb. Probably gone to warn his people about the army's plans." Tanner silenced him with a glare before turning back to Leah. "Major Greeley at the fort has authorized us to investigate any settler with questionable associations. Your Indian friend is wanted for questioning." "Regarding what offense?" Leah challenged. "That's military business, ma'am." Tanner's pretense of politeness was wearing thin. "When he returns, you're obligated to notify us immediately. New territorial regulations." "I wasn't aware civilians fell under military jurisdiction, Mr. Tanner," Leah observed. The second man stepped forward. "Way I hear it, you're mighty close with that Apache. Some might wonder if you're more Indian lover than proper widow." Leah's expression hardened. "I believe we're finished here, gentlemen. If Roma returns, I'll consider your request." "Good day." She began to close the door, but Tanner's boot thrust forward, preventing it. "One more thing," he said, his facade of courtesy evaporating. "There'll be a patrol checking properties regularly now, for your safety, of course." His eyes swept meaningfully around the isolated clearing. Never know what might happen to a woman alone out here. After their departure, Leah's composure crumbled. She sank into a chair, hands trembling with rage and fear. Tanner's threat had been unmistakable. Whatever protection Roma's presence had provided was gone, and the threat now came from those supposedly enforcing the law. Making a swift decision, Leah began gathering essential supplies. If danger threatened from both settlers and soldiers, she needed to find Roma, or at least reach the tribal contact he'd mentioned in his journal. Mid-morning, while checking snares Roma had set along the forest edge, she discovered something that stopped her cold. An arrow embedded in a tree, deliberately broken in half. Painted symbols decorated its shaft, similar to those she'd seen in Roma's journal. Back in the cabin, she compared the markings to the journal's pages. The message was clear. Danger comes. Be ready. 3 suns. 3 days. The same timeline Major Greeley had apparently given Roma. A sound outside froze her in place. Footsteps approaching too light for a settler's boots. Setting down the arrow, she reached again for the rifle. "Leah." Roma's voice came softly through the door, triggering a flood of relief that weakened her knees. She flung the door open to find him standing there, his clothing dirty and torn, exhaustion evident in his face, but his eyes burning with intensity. "You escaped," she whispered, pulling him inside and securing the door. "With help," he confirmed, accepting the water she offered. "Lieutenant Davis, a young officer with a conscience, arranged it. Tanner was here this morning," Leah told him, quickly explaining the encounter. "They're watching the cabin." Roma nodded grimly. "I circled wide to avoid their patrol. Greeley plans to force all Apache bands onto distant reservations. Those who resist will be hunted down." "The Broken Arrow, from White Hawk," Roma confirmed. "The tribe is splitting into smaller groups. moving to higher ground. Those too young, too old, or too sick for the journey are being hidden in sacred caves. And us? Leah asked, the question encompassing all the uncertainty of their future. Roma took her hands, his thumbs tracing gentle circles on her palms. That depends on what you want, Leah. I can take you to a settlement where you'd be safe, then return to help my people. And if I refuse to be separated from you, then our path becomes more dangerous, he said honestly. But we would walk it together. Leah's response was to move into his embrace. Her decision made without words. They held each other in silence, two people from different worlds who had found in each other something neither was willing to surrender. How long do we have? Leah asked finally. Until nightfall, Roma replied. We'll travel under darkness to avoid the patrols. I'll be ready, she promised. As they prepared, gathering only what was essential for survival, Leah felt a strange sense of rightness despite the danger ahead. The cabin that had been her home for years now seemed merely a structure, 4 walls and a roof. Her true home had somehow become this man, and the future they might forge together, wherever that path might lead. Darkness cloaked the forest in protective shadow as Roma and Leah made their final preparations. They traveled light, only what could be carried in 2 small packs. Essential medicines, hunting knife, fire-starting tools, dried meat and cornmeal. Roma had insisted Leah bring Daniel's rifle and what little ammunition remained. The North Ridge is our best route, Roma explained, tracing the path on a rough map he'd drawn in the dirt floor. Soldiers rarely venture that high, and Tanner's men know nothing of the hidden trails. Leah nodded, securing the last items in her pack. She hesitated briefly before reaching beneath her bed, withdrawing a tightly folded bundle wrapped in oilcloth. One more thing, she said, unwrapping the package to reveal a small quilt, its pattern an intricate arrangement of stars and constellations against indigo fabric. Roma studied it curiously. This seems an unusual choice for difficult travel. It was my grandmother's, Leah explained, her fingers tracing the careful stitching. She made it after escaping persecution in her village. The pattern isn't just decorative. She spread the quilt on the table, revealing what appeared to be a random arrangement of stars. But as Roma looked closer, he recognized the outline of the surrounding mountains, rendered in subtle stitching. The constellations are accurate, he observed, but positioned to reflect landmarks on Earth. Leah nodded. My grandmother called it her pathway home. The white stitching shows safe routes, water sources, and these, she indicated tiny symbols nearly invisible within the pattern, are Apache protection markings. I never understood their meaning until I saw similar symbols in your journal. Roma traced the markings with weathered fingers. These are ancient signs, known only to certain tribal elders. Your grandmother carried deep knowledge. She carried many secrets, Leah said softly. This was her most prized possession. I've never taken it from the cabin, but something tells me we'll need its guidance now. A sound outside the distant crack of a branch silenced them both. Roma moved swiftly to the window, scanning the darkness. Riders, he whispered. 2, maybe 3. Moving slowly through the trees, Leah quickly folded the quilt, securing it in her pack. Tanner, likely. Roma extinguished the single candle, plunging the cabin into darkness. They're earlier than expected. We leave now, through the back. They slipped out through the small rear window, Roma leading Leah in a crouching run toward the protective shadows of the pine forest. Behind them, flickering lantern light appeared at the cabin's edge. Down, Roma whispered, pulling Leah flat against the earth as riders emerged into the clearing. From their concealed position, they watched Tanner and 4 men approach the dark cabin. 2 carried torches that cast menacing shadows across the snow-covered ground. Harper woman, Tanner's voice carried clearly through the night. Military orders. Open up. When no response came, he signaled his men to surround the structure. 2 disappeared around back while Tanner and another dismounted, approaching the front door with weapons drawn. We need to move, Roma breathed against Leah's ear. While they're occupied, Keeping low, they retreated deeper into the forest, using the trees for cover. The sharp crack of the cabin door being forced open spurred them to quicker movement. "They're inside," Leah whispered, a tremor in her voice as she glanced back at the home she'd likely never see again. Roma squeezed her hand reassuringly. "The cabin is just wood. What matters walks beside me." They continued in silence, Roma setting a pace that balanced speed with stealth. His knowledge of the forest proved invaluable as he led them along nearly invisible game trails, avoiding open areas where moonlight might betray their presence. After an hour of steady climbing, they paused at a ridgeline that offered a view of the valley below. In the distance, orange light bloomed against the darkness, a fire growing rapidly in intensity. "They've burned it," Leah said, her voice hollow as she watched flames consume the cabin that had been her home for years. "Everything." Roma stood silent beside her, understanding the weight of what she witnessed. Finally he spoke. "When I left my tribal lands, I carried nothing of my previous life except memories and a few sacred items. I thought it would empty me. Instead, I found the space within filled with unexpected possibilities." Leah turned from the distant fire, her face resolute in the moonlight. "I made my choice when I decided to follow you. I don't regret it." A sudden flurry of movement in the valley caught their attention. Riders, at least a dozen, converging on the burning cabin from different directions. "Greely's men," Roma observed grimly. "This was coordinated. They meant to trap us." "Where do we go now?" Leah asked. Roma pointed toward the higher peaks. "There's a sacred place, a cave system known only to tribal elders. White Hawk will have taken the vulnerable ones there. We'll find temporary sanctuary while we decide our next move." As they resumed their journey, climbing steadily through the night, Leah unfurled the star quilt and draped it across their shoulders. Against the cold mountain air, it provided little practical warmth, but as Roma recognized the star patterns aligning with the peaks around them, he understood its greater value. Like their unexpected union, it bridged two worlds, carrying ancient wisdom into an uncertain future. "Your grandmother was wise to create such a map," Roma said as they navigated a particularly treacherous slope. "Some paths are meant to be remembered, even when they can no longer be seen." Leah's hand found his in the darkness. "Some paths," she agreed, "are meant to be discovered together." Dawn broke over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in rose gold, as Roma and Leah approached the final ascent to the sacred caves. They had traveled through the night, stopping only for brief rests when the terrain became too treacherous to navigate in dark. There Roma pointed toward what appeared to be a solid rock face, partially obscured by pine trees. "The entrance is hidden behind the waterfall." Leah studied the cliff skeptically. "I see no waterfall. In spring, melting snow creates one," Roma explained. "The people have used these caves for generations, a place of safety during troubled times." As they drew closer, Roma slowed his pace, scanning the surrounding forest with heightened vigilance. "We're being watched," he murmured. Leah tensed, her hand moving toward the rifle slung across her back. "Not by enemies," Roma reassured her, before calling out in Apache. His words echoed against the stone face, seemingly disappearing into the mountain itself. For several moments, nothing happened. Then, so quietly that Leah almost missed it, a figure materialized from between two massive boulders, a young warrior with a bow held ready but not drawn. Roma spoke again in Apache, gestures indicating Leah. The young man's eyes narrowed as he studied her, clearly suspicious of the white woman in their sacred refuge. Finally, he nodded once and motioned for them to follow. Their guide led them through a narrow crevice that would have been invisible without direction. The passage twisted sharply, plunging them into near-total darkness, before widening into a spacious cavern lit by small fires. The air was surprisingly warm, with the earthy scent of herbs and cooking food. Women tended to children and elders gathered around the fires, while warriors stood guard at various positions throughout the cave. All activity paused as Roma and Leah entered, every eye turning to assess the newcomers. White Hawk emerged from the shadows, his ancient face creased with both relief and concern at the sight of Roma. You escaped the blue coats, he stated, but at great cost, I think. The fort commander plans forced relocation, Roma confirmed. Those who resist will be treated as hostiles. A murmur passed through the gathered tribe members. White Hawk raised a hand for silence before addressing Leah directly. The woman of two bloods, he said in surprisingly clear English. Your presence here confirms what the dreams foretold. Leah met his gaze steadily. My home has been destroyed for harboring Roma. I chose to follow him here. White Hawk's weathered face revealed nothing of his thoughts as he studied her. Follow me, he said finally. Both of you. He led them deeper into the cave system, past families settling into makeshift camps, through narrow passages where the walls glistened with mineral deposits, until they reached a small chamber set apart from the other. Few eyes have seen this place, White Hawk explained as he lit a torch fixed to the wall. Its light revealed ancient petroglyphs covering the smooth stone surface, images of spirals, handprints, animals and human figures that seemed to dance across the rock face. Our oldest stories, White Hawk continued, carved before memory. Roma approached the wall reverently, his fingers hovering over but not touching the sacred images. I was brought here as a boy, when my father still lived. These are the origin tales of our people. Look closer, White Hawk instructed, directing their attention to a specific section. Leah moved forward, eyes widening as she recognized patterns similar to those on her grandmother's quilt. There, carved into stone centuries ago, was a spiral pattern with radiating lines identical to markings on her quilt and on Roma's medicine pouch. The sign of joining, White Hawk explained. When the people were young, we were many tribes scattered across the mountain. This marks the union of two family lines, one from the sunrise, one from the sunset. Roma looked to White Hawk, understanding dawning in his eyes. The prophecy you spoke of is older than any living memory, the elder confirmed. In times of greatest danger, the separated bloodlines would reunite, bringing renewal. His gaze shifted to Leah. Your grandmother carried our markings. Her blood remembers, even if her mind did not. Leah touched the ancient carving, feeling a connection that transcended her understanding. You believe Roma and I fulfill this prophecy. What I believe matters little, White Hawk replied, but the signs align in ways not seen for generations. The son of Black Bear returns when the people face their darkest hour. The woman of mixed blood dreams true dreams. Together, you find your way to the sacred cave. A commotion from the main cavern interrupted them. Rapid footsteps and urgent voices. A young warrior appeared at the chamber entrance, breathing heavily. Grandfather, he addressed White Hawk. Scouts report soldiers in the lower valleys. They search with Tanner's men as guides. 3 groups, moving upward. White Hawk's expression remained calm, despite the alarming news. How much time? If they find the hidden trails, perhaps one day before they reach this height. After the messenger departed, a heavy silence filled the small chamber. The flickering torchlight made the ancient images seem to move, as if the figures carved in stone were awakening after centuries of sleep. We cannot fight the blue coats, Roma said finally. Not here, with children and elders. No, White Hawk agreed. But perhaps we need not fight at all. His eyes moved deliberately between Roma and Leah. Perhaps another path awaits, one that fulfills both prophecy and peace. It's madness, Roma stated flatly, pacing the small council chamber where tribal elders had gathered to discuss White Hawk's proposal. To walk voluntarily into the fort would be surrendering to certain imprisonment or worse. White Hawk remained serene despite Roma's agitation. Not surrender, negotiation. He looked around at the assembled elders. Our people cannot flee forever. Winter still holds the high passes. The weak and young will not survive a forced march. And they will survive relocation to distant lands, Roma countered. Greeley's orders were clear. Orders can be challenged, White Hawk replied. Lieutenant Davis aided your escape. Others at the fort may harbor similar doubts about the justice of these commands. Takoda, who had maintained silence until now, spoke. Whitehawk suggests you and the woman approach the fort together, she as a respected settler, you as a tribal representative. With Lieutenant Davis's help, request direct communication with Fort Laramie, where the original treaty was signed. Leshise, who had been included in this council at Whitehawk's insistence, studied the faces around her. Why would Greeley allow this? He seems determined to force your removal, because you will bring something he cannot ignore, Whitehawk answered. He turned to Roma. You carry your father's medallion still. Roma's hand moved unconsciously to the small leather pouch at his neck. From it he withdrew a tarnished silver disc, its surface inscribed with the official seal of the United States government and the date of the treaty signing 15 years earlier. This was given to each tribal signatory, Roma explained to Leah. Official recognition of our sovereign rights to these territories. Such medals were created in pairs, Whitehawk added, one for the tribe, one kept in government records. They cannot deny its authenticity. Leah considered the proposal carefully. Even with the medallion, Greeley could simply arrest Roma, or both of us, not if you request the meeting publicly, Takoda suggested. At Cooper's Creek trading post, with witnesses present, demand to speak with Lieutenant Davis specifically. And then what, Roma asks, skepticism evident in his tone. We ask politely for Greeley to respect a treaty his government seems eager to forget. Whitehawk's ancient eyes held a depth of wisdom earned through decades of watching the changing relationship between his people and the encroaching white settlers. We ask for time, for a hearing with officials who still honor the concept of law, for recognition that not all whites support this injustice. He gestured toward Leah. Your presence changes everything, daughter of two bloods. A white woman who stands with us creates complications they did not anticipate. Silence fell over the council as each considered the dangerous gamble Whitehawk proposed. Finally, Roma spoke. If we fail, the consequences fall not just on us, but on everyone here. If we do nothing, Takoda countered, the consequences are certain. Soldiers will find this place eventually. Roma turned to Leah, his expression grave. This is not your fight. You could seek safety with sympathetic settlers. The Coopers would help you. Leah's chin lifted slightly, a gesture Roma had come to recognize, as her determination taking hold. My cabin is ashes. My life there is over. And this fight became mine the moment I recognized the injustice behind it. She reached for his hand, a public gesture that raised eyebrows among the more traditional elders. Besides, Whitehawk is right. My presence complicates their narrative. The council continued until dusk, debating details, contingencies, and fallback plans should the diplomatic approach fail. Throughout, Leah observed the complex dynamics among the tribal leaders. The respect accorded to Roma, despite his years of absence, the deference shown to Whitehawk's wisdom, the pragmatic concerns raised by younger warriors like Takoda. As torches were lit against the gathering darkness, Whitehawk raised his hand for a final word. The prophecy speaks of reunion bringing renewal, he said, his gaze moving between Roma and Leah. Perhaps this renewal extends beyond bloodlines to the relationship between our peoples. Later, in the small alcove allocated to them, Roma and Leah sat close together, the silver medallion resting between them. My father believed in the power of this token, Roma said quietly. He trusted the words spoken over it. Even as he died, he maintained that trust. Leah covered the medallion with her palm. Then we must make his trust mean something. Roma studied her face in the dim light. You understand the danger we face. I understand that some things are worth the risk, she replied. You taught me that when you stayed to heal me instead of continuing your journey to die alone. Roma's weathered hand covered hers where it rested on the medallion. If this works, if by some miracle we secure recognition of the treaty, what then? For us, the question contained all they had not yet fully spoken of, a future neither had dared imagine in detail. Then, Leah said simply, we build something new, something that honors both our pasts while creating its own path forward. She leaned her head against his shoulder. But first, We must survive tomorrow. Roma nodded, slipping the medallion back into its pouch. Tomorrow they would leave the safety of the caves, traveling to Cooper's Creek, to set their dangerous plan in motion. Success would mean life for the people. Failure would likely mean death, or a separation more permanent than either could bear to contemplate. Cooper's Creek trading post bustled with unusual activity for a late winter morning. Word had spread quickly among nearby settlements that Leah Harper, whose cabin had mysteriously burned days earlier, had arrived in the company of an Apache elder to make some sort of announcement. Curious settlers mingled with regular customers, creating a crowd that served the dual purpose of providing witnesses and making it difficult for Tanner's men to take immediate action. Michael Cooper had positioned himself near the door, keeping watch for any sign of military presence. Inside, Roma stood beside Leah at the trading post's small counter, tension evident in his carefully controlled posture. Though dressed in the clean but simple clothing of a frontier settler, items provided by Cooper himself, Roma's bearing retained the unmistakable dignity of a tribal leader. "You're certain about this?" Cooper asked, Leah quietly, concern evident in his clear-lined face. "Once word reaches the fort, there's no turning back." "We're certain," Leah confirmed, her hand briefly touching Roma's in a gesture not lost on the observant shopkeeper. Cooper nodded slowly. "Then I'll do as you asked." He turned, addressing the gathered crowd. "Folks, Mrs. Harper has something she'd like to say. I'd appreciate if you'd give her your attention." The murmured conversations quieted as all eyes turned to Leah. She stepped forward, her calm demeanor belying the gravity of their situation. "Many of you know me," she began, her clear voice carrying through the trading post. "I've lived peacefully in these mountains since my husband Daniel brought me here 8 years ago. What some of you may not know is that 3 nights ago, my cabin was burned to the ground by men claiming to act under military authority." A ripple of shocked murmurs passed through the crowd. Their justification was my association with Roma, an Apache elder who has harmed no one and violated no law. Leah gestured to Roma, who inclined his head slightly toward the gathered settlers. "We have come today to publicly request a formal meeting with Lieutenant Davis of the fort regarding violations of the treaty signed at Fort Laramie 15 years ago." "Treaty?" Someone scoffed from the back. "Indians don't honor any treaty. This one was broken by the government, not the Apache," Leah countered. "And we have proof." Roma stepped forward, removing the silver medallion from its pouch. The metal caught the light as he held it up for all to see. "This was given to my father, Chief Black Bear, by government representatives when the treaty was signed," he explained, his dignified English surprising many who had never heard him speak. "It guarantees hunting rights and territorial boundaries for 20 years. Only 5 have passed." The trading post door swung open, admitting a blast of cold air and Michael Cooper, his expression urgent. "Riders coming," he announced. "Military escort." Cooper Sr. moved swiftly to Roma and Leah. "Back room, quickly," he directed, ushering them through a door behind the counter. "Michael will stall them." In the store's cramped back room, Cooper reached beneath a stack of trade goods, withdrawing a folded paper. "This came by dispatch rider this morning," he explained, handing it to Roma. "Lieutenant Davis sent it ahead of their arrival." Roma unfolded the message, reading it quickly before passing it to Leah. The lieutenant's neat handwriting detailed that he had taken the extraordinary step of sending reports about Major Greeley's actions to both Fort Laramie and territorial authorities, citing potential treaty violations and abuse of power. "He's risked his career," Leah whispered, scanning the contents, "perhaps worse." "More importantly," Roma noted, indicating the final paragraph, "he advises us to hold our position here. Apparently representatives from Fort Laramie are already en route to investigate." Cooper nodded grimly. "That explains the unusual patrol patterns. Greeley must have gotten wind that his actions are being questioned from above." The sound of horses and men's voices filtered through the trading post walls. Cooper peeked through a small window. "Major Greeley himself," he confirmed. "With Tanner and a full complement of soldiers, can we trust Davis's information?" Leah asked, tension evident in her voice. "The lieutenant has never given me reason to doubt him," Cooper replied. "But Greeley is a dangerous man to cross, especially now that he's backed into a corner." Romer's expression remained impassive, though Leah could read the calculations behind his eyes. "If higher authorities are truly coming, our best strategy is to remain visible, but protected. Greeley cannot act openly against us without revealing his disregard for proper procedure." Boots thumped on the wooden floor of the main room, followed by Michael's voice attempting to delay the inevitable. Then came Greeley's clipped tones, demanding to know the whereabouts of the Apache fugitive and the Harper woman. Leah squared her shoulders. "Decision made. We face him together," she said quietly to Roma. "As equals, as representatives of both worlds." Roma nodded once, his hand briefly clasping hers. "Together," he agreed. Cooper looked between them, understanding dawning in his eye. "Well now," he murmured, "I begin to see what's got Greeley so riled up. It's not just treaty rights he's worried about." He straightened his shopkeeper's apron. "I'll go first. Remind the good major that he's in my establishment and civility is expected." As Cooper pushed through the door, Roma and Lee shared a final private glance, a moment of silent communication that contained both steely resolve and something deeper, something that had grown between them through shared dangers and quiet nights. "Whatever comes," Leah whispered, "I regret nothing." Roma's weathered hand briefly touched her cheek. "Nor I." Then, side by side, they stepped through the door to confront whatever fate awaited them. The trading post fell silent as Roma and Leah entered the main room. Major Greeley stood near the center, his pristine uniform a stark contrast to the weathered clothing of the settlers gathered around. Tanner and two soldiers flanked him, hands resting conspicuously on their sidearms. "Mrs. Harper," Greeley acknowledged coldly, deliberately ignoring Roma, "you've caused considerable disruption with your associations." "The disruption, Major," Leah replied evenly, "came from those who burned my home without cause or warrant." Greeley's mouth tightened. "A regrettable incident. Unauthorized actions of overzealous men." His dismissive glance toward Tanner suggested a scapegoat already chosen. "We've come to discuss treaty violations," Roma stated, his calm dignity drawing all eyes. "The forced relocation you propose directly contradicts agreements signed at Fort Laramie." "Treaties," Greeley said with contempt, "are diplomatic niceties, subject to military necessity. The Department of War has determined that Apache bands in this territory present a threat to civilian safety. Based on what evidence?" Leah challenged. "That's military business, ma'am," Greeley replied, his patronizing tone sparking murmurs among the watching settlers. Roma stepped forward, the medallion visible in his hand. "This official seal represents the word of your government. Would you have these people witness its betrayal?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed Greeley's face as he noted the settlers' reactions. What had been planned as a simple arrest was becoming a public referendum on his actions. He straightened, reasserting authority. "You're both under arrest, interfering with military operations, harboring hostiles and inciting unrest." He gestured sharply to his men. "Escort them to the fort." Cooper moved to intervene. "Now hold on, Major. This is my establishment." And the trading post door swung open with force, cutting off Cooper's protest. Lieutenant Davis entered, followed by three officers Greeley clearly hadn't expected. The insignia on the lead officer's uniform identified him as a full colonel. "Major Greeley," the colonel addressed him sharply. "Stand down immediately." Greeley's face drained of color. "Colonel Harrison, I wasn't informed of your arrival." "Evidently not," Harrison replied, his gaze taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. "Lieutenant Davis sent dispatches regarding concerning activities in this region. I've come to investigate personally." He turned to Roma, showing none of the contempt Greeley had displayed. "You would be the son of Black Bear, the treaty signatory?" Roma inclined his head respectfully. "I am." Harrison nodded. "And you have the ceremonial medallion, I see." "Good." He turned back to Greeley, whose composure was visibly crumbling. Major, you'll return to the fort immediately. Consider yourself relieved of command, pending investigation. One of Harrison's officers handed him a document, which he promptly extended to Greeley. Written orders from General Hammond. I suggest you comply without further incident. The atmosphere in the trading post shifted palpably as Greeley's authority collapsed before their eyes. Tanner began edging toward the door, sensing the changing winds. Tanner, Harrison barked, stopping the man in his tracks. You'll remain as well. Serious allegations have been made regarding your role in recent events. With remarkable composure given his circumstances, Greeley snapped to attention. Sir, I acted based on reports of hostile activity. Fabricated reports, Lieutenant Davis interjected, stepping forward. With your knowledge, sir. Harrison's stern expression silenced further protest. We'll address this at the fort, Major. For now, you and your men will return under Lieutenant Davis's supervision. After Greeley and his contingent departed, Colonel Harrison turned to address the gathered settlers. The treaty signed at Fort Laramie remains in effect. Any concerns regarding Native American activities should be directed through proper channels, not addressed through vigilante action. His words carried the unmistakable weight of federal authority, causing visible relief among some settlers and disgruntlement among others. When the crowd began to disperse, Harrison approached Roma and Leah privately. I understand your situation is unique, he said, glancing between them. Lieutenant Davis spoke highly of your efforts to prevent bloodshed. The people wish only to live according to the agreed boundaries, Roma replied. But recent weeks have created fear and mistrust on all sides. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. I'm authorized to meet with tribal representatives. Perhaps you both could facilitate such discussions. Later, as they departed Cooper's Creek, escorted respectfully rather than as prisoners, Leah and Roma walked side by side. The weight of immediate danger lifted from their shoulders. It seems impossible, Leah murmured. Hours ago we faced arrest, or worse. White Hawk would say the spirits guided Colonel Harrison's timing, Roma observed, a rare hint of humor warming his voice. And what would Roma say, she asked, her hand finding his as they walked. He considered the question, his gaze taking in the mountains that had been his ancestors' home for countless generations. I would say that sometimes justice comes from unexpected sources, and that two people from different worlds can create change neither could accomplish alone. That evening, as they prepared to return to the caves with news of the day's events, Roma led Leah to a secluded viewpoint overlooking the valley. The setting sun transformed the snow-capped peaks into towers of gold and rose. If the treaty holds, he said quietly, what path would you choose for us? Leah's eyes met his, the golden flecks catching the fading light. A path neither fully in your world nor mine, but something new, something that honors both. Roma nodded, understanding the wisdom in her words. The borderlands, where two worlds meet. As darkness fell over the mountains, they remained there in comfortable silence, two figures silhouetted against the twilight sky, no longer a lone Apache elder and a solitary settler woman, but something the land had not seen in generations, a bridge between divided peoples, and perhaps the beginning of something that might endure beyond their own lives. In that moment of quiet triumph, Roma found himself contemplating not the ending he had once sought in these mountains, but a beginning he had never dared imagine.